3:01, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Council Strategy Committee meeting of January 12th. A quorum is present. The meeting is duly constituted. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda in front of you? Thanks. And a second. Any changes? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Public participation? Haley? No. Approval of the minutes of the meeting of the 10th. This is the fastest turnaround of minutes we've ever seen.
Yes.
Ever, I think. Who's checked them? I'll put my hand up and say I haven't.
I did.
I did
I read them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 15 minutes ago.
Okay, good. So would you like to move acceptance?
I would.
No, you see, I always get, it's adoption, acceptance, and approval. In this case, it's approval.
That's right.
Thank you. And a second? Thanks. And any discussion? Corrections? All in favor of approval? Thanks. And opposed? That carries. Business arising, there being none. We'll move to unfinished business. There being none of that, we'll go to the first staff report.
Okay.
Pam, take it away.
I will. The first budget you're looking at is the utilities, the water, sewer, and the solid waste. And this was prepared at quite a high level of detail. We would say that, in public this is about 90% accurate. We're always required to do this first because we have to set the sewer rates. So the purpose of this is to determine what the expenses are as accurately as possible to see what rates we will then adopt in our bylaws in early February. So the process was the Public Works Manager and the finance staff, essentially Haley and I, sat down and we went line by line through the budget. This year I've also compared the 2014 actual, 2015 actual, and 2016 year-to-date actual, stressing that the 2016 is not complete. Basically all the December invoices don't come in until January. We'll still be following up in February, so there can still be some key expenses missing in 2016. So just when you're looking at the comparability to what we're budgeting versus the 2016 actual, it may look like we're over budgeting, but it's because not all the expenses are in. And we, so the three of us went over it, like I say, line by line, and we came up with a budget, and from that some rates have fallen out. So if we want to go and look at them in detail, if we want to start
Are
with
you
the water.
suggesting that the expenses are 11/12?
I wouldn't say 11/12 because, first of all, that's assuming all expenses come in equally, but also there are a fair number of December expenses in there, but there still are some outstanding invoices. That tend to be the non-regular items.
Okay.
So that will get updated every time you see the budget. So the next time you'll see it'll be January 24th, and I'm hoping it'll be 90-95% accurate by then. And it's in there, sorry, just one other thing, just really purely at this point for comparability purposes.
I had two questions.
Sure.
Do you want me to interrupt as we're going through or wait until the end for questions?
Well, I was thinking of the next thing is this is the water budget, and ask if there's any questions.
Okay.
So
this, do you do a cash or accrual? Is this?
this, the year-to-date at this point is a cash basis because we haven't done any year-end accruals. But we will, in terms of the 2016 budget, as we get more and more accurate, if there are invoices missing, we will accrue them. Because this will tie in the year-to-date actual to the expenses we have in the financial statement. So yes, we will accrue.
So basically it's November-ish?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I just have, sort of going line by line, at this point, I put a 5% increase for water user rates, because that was essentially what we needed, sort of for a break-even budget. And then I've highlighted what an additional 1% gives us, and it's about $7,800. And I'll speak more to that when we get sort of to the bottom line. The secondary suites, I just wanted to speak a bit about that. The secondary suite revenue we get, in the past it's been 40% of the water and the solid waste bill, and it went to administration revenue, and then Haley and I were talking about it, and we felt that the whole purpose of that 40% is recognizing that people who have a secondary suite use more utilities, and it made more sense to us to put that revenue right into the utility. So is a new line to the budget. So it's not new revenue. It was previously in the general fund. But that's what that line is, and we've put it into water and solid waste. And because this will be the first year that sewer, the first full year where sewer, the second year where sewer is billed as a utility, we're actually going to charge people in Kelvin Grove 40% of their sewer bill as well.
Can I just ask about that? That 40% rate was predicated on the previous water utility charge, which was defrayed by a parcel tax. So now we're actually charging 40%. The 40% today is a far bigger absolute number because it's a bigger number because it includes what used to be a parcel tax.
Yeah, in terms of the water, yes, it does.
So
But
how
I
is it
think-
that we could get away with 40% of a much smaller number before and it's still 40%
Well, I think
today?
the principle of it always was, and I wasn't here for the background of it, but it was, we looked at other municipalities and we're saying if you have another tenant, that the 40% I don't think was predicated on what the absolute number was. It was the intent. So I would argue 40% is accurate, and because we had the parcel tax, people got a bit of a break. They weren't paying 40% of the whole water. But at my understanding, the intent was that 40% was reasonable as a charge. So to me, it's more accurate now, whereas before they just got a break because there were parcel taxes.
Okay. The glaring one there, of course, is 3.3 million
Yes.
in revenue. And now, is that, I mean, that makes year-to-year comparison meaningless. Isn't that a capital number that shouldn't really be in operating expenses?
No, it's this is mandated by PSAB. It's the one that is even odder is the loan proceeds. But for budget purposes, that is cash that is coming in, and I have to show it as revenue. So it's all grant revenue, the Build Canada grant as well. So that's if we are, and that's the other big statement. This is predicated on the assumption we're successful with the grants. So I've shown the full amount we've applied for, assuming we'll get both, the amount of loan proceeds, and then down below I show the full capital. And it
Yes,
has
so no
a net,
loan
and it has
proceeds.
a net zero impact on the budget this year because there'll be no loan expenses until 2018.
Because we won't start construction until 2018?
No, because we won't get the loan proceeds until
Oh, I see,
November
okay.
of this year and the first payment. So all of those costs will be in the 5-year plan. We'll determine what loans we're going for, and they'll all be part of the 5-year plan. But the main purpose of this budget now is determine the water utility
The rate, yeah. So just
So-
back that 3370 out of the 5076. I didn't bring my blasted calculator, sorry. In other words, how does 2017 compare to 2016 less the number?
Well, again, the Build Canada grant is going to distort
thanks.
it as well. So without, and
Yeah.
the other thing that's distorting it is the, we had the EMBC. This is more for Eileen, is we had a slide and there were costs incurred for that. So it's a net zero as well. So it might be more effective just literally to look at the water user rates, just 5% more revenue. Because the others are
Yeah, fair
kind of
enough.
one-time items.
Is there any way to present this in such a way that there's two sort of sections where we can subtotal out the stuff that doesn't really pertain to yearly operations, annual operations? Like EMBC assistance, loan proceeds, because that's all related to CapEx.
You could draw a line under total revenues and say above was normal revenue, and then do another section called other revenues.
Capital revenue or whatever the
Something
PSAP.
that defines it as.
Because, you know, it's very hard to compare these numbers because they're all over the place.
Well, there's no comparison, you're right.
There's no comparison.
It is, but then I would argue the important one is the bottom line, because you're always going to
Yeah,
have
yeah, fair
exceptional
enough.
things, and then this is what the net amount is that we have to fund, and we can fund it with a 5% tax increase.
So the bottom line is in fact a surplus of $12,000.
Yes, but recognizing that's with adding depreciation back, and I would like, it'd be nice if we could start putting some money away for reserves to offset the amortization. So basically, with a 5% tax increase, this is the bottom line. So I would argue that 5% is the absolute lowest. You should increase the water utility fees with, and a decision doesn't have to be made today because we are ahead of schedule. We can look at this again on January 24th, and then we don't have to go to first, second, and third reading until February 7th. The other thing I've done is at this point, I put in $45,000 for capital, and it's not strictly defined yet because we'll be looking at the capital more. At this point, the Public Works Manager and we haven't identified any capital other than the capital with the grants. But I've sort of put it in there so that if we do have some capital, we wouldn't have to do a budget amendment. We would have the money. Because the problem with the budget amendment, when you come back later, it's sort of like a one-sided entry. I can't go back to the public for more money.
No.
So
It's gotta come from
it's
reserves.
kind of and if we don't spend it, it would just flow into reserves.
What sort of things would be done with that 45,000? SCADA, valves, hydrants?
It's really up in the air. It could be a study, it could be,
But that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a
physical.
small number.
It is.
yeah.
But I felt it was important to have it in there, just because we really did go through the expenses and really look at prior years, and we've pulled a lot out. And we were a little bit, I wouldn't say aggressive, but we were very I don't think there's any fluff in this budget at all. So
Yeah,
I felt
think
we needed that
followed your
45,000.
philosophy or of taxing for what's absolutely needed.
Only stuff we can do,
Yeah.
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 And
So
then
the
historically,
45
we've
grand-
never,
The 45 grand's the buffer then.
Yeah, for example, we've had a hydrant that was hit during the
Yes.
snowfall.
yeah.
We're submitting to ICBC, but if we don't get the funding for that, we'll basically have to pay for that, so.
So it is a buffer, but I wouldn't say it's a plug. It's, there's a very good chance, given what's happened historically, we will need some capital items, even if at this point we haven't specifically identified them.
I have a couple of
Sure.
lines that I questioned. One was the professional fees, contract services, just going back historically from 2014, 15, and then I realized the 2016 isn't real, but that's a huge jump.
Yes, because the imp was in the 130, and that was the number in particular we really wanted to look at, that we had budgeted in the past fully intending to do studies, but it was just a combination of the, turnover and not having enough staff, and that's why we wanted to look at that number more realistically, so we did decrease it quite a bit.
No, but
From
I'm
the
not
budget,
looking
in
at
terms of the
what the
actual,
budget
yeah.
was. I'm looking at the actuals and saying that's a high actual number.
Yes.
Is there an explanation for?
Did I bring my detailed
What we're
notes in
looking
terms
to
of-
do?
We have a
Yeah,
few
so
things in there.
There are several items that we need to do that are urgent. There's some work that has to be done on a couple of the water main bridges that'll total about $10,000.
This is design fees,
That's-
engineering.
This is contract services, any contract service.
Oh, this includes
Okay.
contract, so it's not
Yes.
only engineering, yeah, that's
No,
right.
it's
yeah.
not just engineering, it's all contract services. If we're able to, if we do not get the tank money, there may be a clean. What else did we?
Yes, I think what we had kept in here, again, that is a good point. There's the consultant that, or the design that we have to pay for prior to getting the
Thank
grant.
you.
And if we get the grant, it will be covered. But if we don't get the grant, it won't be covered, and I didn't want to get caught as well.
Okay.
So your point is well taken. That's the hardest account to budget, because
Okay.
we want to have enough money if we want to do studies. But you are correct, historically, we have over budgeted every year, and that's why we chose to lower it this year. The good news is, if we don't spend it, it does flow to reserves, but that was
Yes,
our
I
hardest
just-
number to budget. But that was the biggest one. It's like, this is predicated on the assumption we're getting the grants, but there's that one cost that we have to do, and if we don't get the grant, we still have to pay for it. And I wanted to have money in there just in case.
Okay.
And if we do get the grant, it means we will be over budget in that again, but then it will just go to reserves.
Okay,
So
and the
doubled up on that again.
same question with maintenance. Just looking historically, not at the prior year budget, although you can even look at the prior year budget on that one, is there a lot more maintenance being done on the water?
Part of it was $15,000 for PRVs. We previously billed that as capital, but that actually isn't correct. It's really maintenance. So every year we would put $15,000 in capital, and we didn't this year, and we've moved it up to operating. So $15,000 of it is for that.
Okay.
And then
Then that explains it.
yes.
So just walk us through the signs, the negative and positive signs on the rebudgets, the CapEx rebudgets. So in 2016 budget, you show a negative 329,000. What does that mean? Remind us. That means we didn't spend that money.
Oh no, that was what we had budgeted to spend to finish Build Canada.
But
So
we didn't
had-
spend it,
and we
so
didn't. So we had the revenue up above. So at the top we had revenue of 219, which was 2/3 of the expense, and
plus a
because
bit
of-
more, yeah.
So this year we have to finish Build Canada. So I had budgeted 217 for the balance, and then 2/3 as revenue.
So where does this 329 come in 2017?
Well, what will happen is it'll flow through to surplus, and then it becomes the 217. The difference between the 329 and the 217 is what we actually spent.
What happened?
And,
Yeah.
and this is where it does get a little confusing. Because I'm showing Build Canada revenue, I have to show the Build Canada rebudget, or I would show too much surplus. But all the other, anything else we would have to rebudget isn't in here. Now, as it turns out with water, we only are rebudgeting the SCADA. But this will come into effect when we look at the general fund budget. I haven't rebudgeted everything yet, but it's going to come from what the actual surplus in 2016 will be once we have the final numbers. So it's like a net zero, and if we have a bit more of a surplus, I would like that just to flow to reserves. I don't want to include it in the money I'm showing that we can spend this year. We'll talk about that again. when
Well,
we get
that
to
was the
general
choice
fund.
that we made last
But,
year. We had to, although I would also say, I think this year, given that we have, not to put too fine a point on it, more confidence that the money will be correctly spent and was justified in the first place, I think I speak for everybody that we'd like to see that money being spent in the next 4 months, rather than waiting for it to be rebudgeted before we gear up again. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? So,
But what we don't have to wait, because essentially it has been budgeted, you approved it, we haven't spent it, we're rebudgeting it, but it's in the 5-year plan.
yeah, I know,
so
but
we don't
remember
have to wait
in
for
the past we
approval.
pulled back some of those things, saying, hey, okay, good, we didn't do it, and let's maybe
No,
not-
and that's still a decision that we will make, and that'll be, I'll have that for the January 24th meeting as we get more.
And do we
firm in
decide then?
2016.
We don't
Yeah.
wait until the final budget.
Oh, no, no.
Okay, good.
And it's being budgeted, so because some of them, like there's rebudgets that are very simple. It's literally because of bad weather. We've hired someone and they couldn't finish the work at the end of December, so technically it's a rebudget. But it could all be completed before I even bring you the first budget, so there's no time delay on those.
So
It's
when do we
just
see the 2016 actual, which includes the $30,000 renegotiate on the IMP and, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that we will never have to see again?
Well, that's in those numbers now.
That's in
I'm just
the
saying
numbers,
that there's still outstanding invoices, so these numbers, the 26 numbers are a little low right now.
And the utilities, is that your Christmas lights that's going to be bumping those up?
Well, I'll put them under any fund or budget that I can. Yeah, so maybe it is. Thank you for reminding me about Christmas lights.
It's the water.
Yes,
So
I
it's
think
not
That's to
actually
illuminate
water.
the water with.
that's the case of the 26 number, I believe will change before final, so.
Yes.
But again, as I say, this is a more complete budget
Mm-hmm.
than the general fund, that's a higher level budget. But as these 2016 numbers come in, I mean, we can change the budget as well.
What I'm liking is the transfer to general fund at the bottom instead of the negative that we've had for
Yes,
many,
yes.
many years. And the money's been coming out of the
Well,
general
that was
fund.
as much indiscipline because this 85 transfer out of general fund never happened because we didn't finish the projects. I believe this $12,000 number for the first time. As it is, we're going to show a surplus on whatever happened in 2016.
I'm of that view too. I think the 5% is going to hold strong because the padding of the 92 for the pro fees and the contract services.
Yeah.
on the contract.
Don't
But-
use padding.
But that's,
Oh, that's what-
that was sort of my point. I would like us to look in 2017 in isolation. We know there's going to be a surplus in water, but we need that to flow to reserves because I don't obviously have the 2016 estimated reserve balances because I want to wait.
How we
But
do, yeah.
at the end of 2015, there was 750,000 of unrestricted reserves, 626 was general, but water was in a deficit of 76,000.
Yeah.
So what I'm really pleased about is that surplus, because we're only, even after the rebudgets, we should have a bit of a surplus, will flow in and we'll finally be in a positive with the water surplus. And there's 187,000 in the sewer surplus.
But that surplus will only last the course of until we start doing the capital work.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So what-
I consider these numbers still low, but I just, at least in water, we're coming into the positive.
So
because
we're
we
looking
do-
at spending how much on water? Minus the, I don't know how to work your calculator on.
The
In
expenses.
other, where I'm going is, what is the per subscriber fee going to be?
5% higher than last year.
Okay, so what's the absolute number?
I don't-
Well, just
Oh, it was last year.
divide the revenue by 550.
Well, it's not
Well-
550, it's,
No, you need to take out
It's about the
this
$1,000 still.
loans and
Oh,
stuff.
the loans, you're right.
Yeah, no, once you
I
take out
the
all,
loan out too.
take out the
Yeah.
non-real expenditure.
Yes.
Non-real operating cost.
Yes.
In other words, what are we covering with our utility fee? Is that,
we're covering everything that's here except the amortization.
okay, so what is the
Because we're
utility
adding
fee
it back.
going to be?
It'll be 5% over last year, but I can't remember what last year's was.
I
It
think
was,
it's 1,870 with a 5% increase roughly, if we don't add any new people this year.
was it 18 or was it 14?
Well, it was 1781 last year, so if I add 5% to that, I get 1870.
Okay, so $1,900, which is why we win the absolute prize, blue ribbon and star on top, highest fees in the province.
Best water in BC.
By a mile.
And
By a mile, exactly.
By a
a mile.
mile.
okay, so that's that.
14 plus solid waste.
Or maybe it was.
17. Yeah, it was 1,400, and then it'll be
Included
plus
300
solid waste. We were
something.
including the solid waste.
And what was our increase last year?
Last year,
8%, 12%?
it was 16
It
one
was
year
high.
and 10 the other? Sorry, I meant to make a note of that before I came in.
So we're ahead.
This is,
Our increase is less.
Yes.
I think we've done a good job
In
educating
percentage,
people
not in
on,
actual.
Oh, no.
in terms of educating people, this is the true cost of the water. Especially when we had the public forum last time, we spoke a lot about that, and people seem to finally be getting that we're actually taxing what the water really costs. Even Mr. Ando seemed to finally understand that. And to me, 5% would be the absolute lowest I would want to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's
It would
almost
be
inflation.
nice
There are-
to go a bit to put some money toward reserves.
We all know our water's expensive, okay? We all know that, and we go through a lot to produce it, and it does cost us a lot of money. So why this constant worry about where we sit in position with everybody else? We know our water's expensive, period, that's it. We're trying to cut it
Yeah.
down, but we can't
Yeah.
until such times we hook up to
Yeah.
that big
Well,
tap on the other side
The
there.
only reason it's important is that we can use that as a lever
Okay.
in negotiation for
Yeah.
alternatives
Yeah.
to come in the future.
But I think the other point, because we have, in the last couple of years, had more accurate increases to reflect the cost, we are pulling ourselves this year out of the water deficit, which I think is huge, and that's something we can start building our reserves again for water.
Yeah, that's only a notional deficit, of course, but it
It's not national,
exists.
it's real. I mean,
Yeah.
that water fund, we have been not charging enough fees to cover our actual
Yeah.
expenses, so it's pretty real.
And have we not been borrowing against it as well for other general expenditure?
No.
No, we haven't?
No.
Okay.
No.
What is the deficit?
At the end of last year, it was $76,000, so the surplus that I'm anticipating for 2016 will put us into the positive. And then the
Temporarily.
5%.
But
will
this
keep us-
12,404, that's a real surplus. That's going to last forever.
It's just 12,000. I mean, to me, it's almost flat. So essentially, a 5% increase puts nothing into reserves and really recovers a minimal amount of our amortization. So I guess what I'm suggesting is for council to think about, but maybe have a increase more than 5%.
Well, I was actually going to go the other way. If 1% is $7,800, why not go with a 4% increase? That will make the surplus, the budgeted surplus, about zero.
But I don't like the fact that we're adding amortization back in
Yeah.
again. So
Exactly.
that was a temporary thing we did years ago when we switched the accounting system, when we switched, the government switched the
When we went to
PSAP,
PSAP.
right.
Yeah, it's when we went to
It was a
PSAP.
temporary thing that was supposed to last for a few years until we could go out of it. We've never
Yeah. I don't
stopped
know
it.
so much just to the wording, not so much temporary. This is the reporting. You show adding it back, but then the idea is you will have enough flowing to reserves to offset the amortization. And we're not budgeting for
For res-
amortization. And I would like
We add it
to,
back, yeah. Or do we?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
do
there
add
it
it
is,
back,
there, yeah.
So you're exactly right. It's a bit of a misnomer saying we're flat because we know we have to replace these assets. And I'm not suggesting we add back all of the amortization and have a
I'd just like
increase
to
of
see that
50%.
number going down
Yeah,
every
exactly.
year
Like
so
I
that
was,
we're
if we
adding
aim
less.
to maybe do a third of it and just aim towards that.
There's a
I
philosophy
support
there.
that as well.
And just to remind council what that philosophy is, and there's a balance, I suppose, I advocate that you pay for your investment in infrastructure through loans so that the future beneficiaries of that infrastructure pay with interest on the loan. I don't believe in taking our money and giving it to some future Lions Bear to build a water system with, for example. There's a balance, I suppose, because we have underspent for years. So we actually, if we were to be responsible, have to catch up. But I don't like using my money to pay for somebody's infrastructure in 20 years. I
No.
don't want to put my money into reserve.
I totally disagree. You are taking your money to replace the roads and the water and everything that we're using
Right now.
right now and destroying it. So then, when the next people come in, they've got to pay for all the work that we've done.
And they get to use
So
it.
it's the opposite.
So I die.
No, we're using it. We're using
It's
it,
paid for.
and we're not paying. No, we're not paying.
Here it is. We're paying almost $1 million
I
for water.
might suggest that this is.
This-
It's a more
Yeah.
philosophical
Yes.
one.
But one other point I'd like to make on that,
It's a
that
different
is,
discussion at
yeah,
a different
yeah,
time.
and we are going to
Here.
have that discussion. Yes, we are going to have that discussion. I'm
Okay.
tying it more in around the time Bill's here, maybe after the audit, than just having a fundamental
Well, I
discussion
know what
on
Bill's
what we want.
philosophy
Or-
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so do I, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I tell him we can't afford it, Bill.
No, can
But
anybody?
there is another important point of having reserves, aside from the philosophical discussion about amortization. We see what happens here when there's a slide and something's not covered by DFA, or something's not covered by PEP, or something happens that's not covered at all, and just how easily things can break down here with water. we need money in there, aside from, you can argue whether or not it's for amortization, I'd like a couple of $100,000 in there just in case something happens.
And
Yeah.
that's the business model.
Yeah.
That's the business model. Business model is predicated on the fact that you're paying as you're going, because you know you're gonna have to
Right.
replace it.
Yes.
If you don't do that, you're gonna be in dire straits. Yeah, we're a municipality, yeah, we have the ability to
Yeah.
borrow and do this, do that, but the reality is, on the business model, you do that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do it any other way.
You're very conservative all of a sudden.
That's the way it
Sit
is.
beside me
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Why not?
Okay, well, that's good. So
I
really,
came through 2 days of meetings with my accountants, thank you very much.
your head's spinning. So you see the math, it's all here in front of us.
Yes.
Really, the only
Yeah.
decision is, are we, nods around the table, okay with a 5% increase in user fees? We've been given the absolute numbers, they're not insubstantial. In fact, gives us the prize in the province, which is I'm very proud of. We okay with that?
Well, what I'd like to suggest is that you don't decide now,
No,
that
yes.
I present this again, not in this level of detail, but the same reports updated for the 2016, and then at that point, we will accrue the ones that we haven't got, and we'll have quite
And
a
give us the
solid
absolute
26
numbers, too.
numbers, and then maybe try to persuade you to tax a little bit more, to put some money in reserves.
Tax or fee?
Fee
It's
a
a
little
fee,
bit more.
Okay, well, sorry, go on.
But anyway, my point is, you don't have to make up your, sorry, Peter, you don't have to make up your mind. Now we have, because we're ahead of schedule, we have another whole session we can talk about it, and then it's a session after that where we have to do first, second, and third reading of the fees.
Roger that. What were you going to say, Peter?
I was just going to clarify for the record that this committee doesn't decide anything,
No.
it just recommends to council.
So I'm seeing nods around
For the
the table
record.
that would be fine to recommend this to the business meeting of council, which is us. So the formality is.
I would go higher than the 5. I think.
Don't go. Because that'll be some. Let's see the rest of it first.
Yeah, no, all joking aside, this is just to give you information, it's a lot to absorb, and I'll have another meeting, we'll talk about it in 2 weeks, and then it's 2 weeks after that, that we have another CSC, and then that evening for second and third reading.
Okay, let's move on to sewer.
So sewer,
I'm sure.
again, we did the same process with sewer, and with sewer, for a combination of reasons, with staffing issues over the years, we've never spent the budget. So we really took a close look at this as well. One of the reasons we have the 187,000 surplus in sewer is just because we were under budget every year and we had a surplus that kept flowing. So again, we have 187,000 surplus in sewer. It'll be reduced about 19,000 this year because of the capital expenditures, and we had budgeted for a drawdown of the surplus
Where is that?
last year. Under the 2016 budget, down at the bottom, we had budgeted for a 36,000 draw, and it's looking, and these sewer numbers are pretty firmer than the, I'm not expecting as many outstanding invoices for sewer, so I'm comfortable that we will have an 18,000 draw, so a net 18,000 gain from what we had budgeted.
Did you spend that 35 grand?
We did,
That was on the walkway
were-
and the new
yes.
gate and all that stuff. Yeah.
and yes, safety improvements and camera, a pipe camera. So we were almost right on budget. We were $587 favorable.
When do we get to see some of the output of that pipe camera?
Never had a councillor or a mayor ask. Anytime you want, Your Honor, Your Worship.
The idea being that it's not so much for us; it's
Yeah.
for people to see what they just spent $14,000 camera on.
Absolutely.
Can we stream that on YouTube?
Stream it, yeah. Put it on YouTube. That's good enough.
A2,
Here's what our sewer pipe looks like.
We could do a day in the life of a toilet roll.
Yeah, there
Guys,
you
it's
go.
not that bad.
Not the roll, the paper.
It's not that bad.
Well, pick whatever you want.
It's just water. Okay, so
So
that
with the
looks
sewer-
so
sorry.
zero increase in rates.
Yeah, because I did this before the council meeting and I got approval to repeal the parcel tax, I did assume I would be successful. So the parcel tax is not shown here, and it's all coming from user fee rates. So again, if you remember in the report, I said that it would be a net increase of about $35. Because of the cuts we made to the budget in the expenses, I'm actually able to give them the absolute dollar same fee. So I thought that was
More by
good news.
coincidence than
Yes.
anything, but yeah, okay.
Not so much coincidence, it was, we made an effort to make the sewer budget as realistic as possible, and as a result, the fees came down, the expenses came down right a bit, so it allowed us to have a lower fee.
Good management.
And then the secondary, well, thank you to our public works
Wow.
manager. Secondary suite fees, again, I'm showing the revenue here. This, in the past, we haven't charged the 40% on the sewer, so that will be new for the secondary suite. But there's just 6 secondary suites in Kelvin Grove that will be
Officially
impacted.
acknowledged, yes.
Ones that I can collect.
Yeah.
This one. The other adjustment was we basically, and this will have, I'll be talking about this again in the general fund, we do a labor model, and that's probably the biggest operating expense, obviously, of all these budgets. And then for the public works, we determine what our public works department costs, and then we allocate it to water, sewer, solid waste, parks, and public works. And the allocations, we adjusted them this year to look more historically what it's been actually. So as a result, part of the reason we've had a surplus in sewer is because we've over budgeted that portion of salaries. So there was a substantial savings in that. So that's, you're going to find in all of those areas the salaries are up and down. The labor model itself is what drives it. It's just how I'm allocating it to the different departments. And the professional fees and contract services came down because of course the imp was budgeted in there.
That's because you don't really have
Prior
any
years.
plans for sewer upgrades or capex this year.
On the sewer side?
Yeah.
No. We don't know what we can spend the money on. We don't know the condition of our pipes, so.
So with a 0% increase, we come down and we'll have a surplus of about 11,500, which will.
Can we not draw some of those reserves down even further? Well, I suppose we don't know. We'd have to manage expectations there, because that would then mean a decrease in sewer rates, which we couldn't promise next year.
When the actual audit is done,
Mm-hmm.
they don't add back in the amortization, do they? It comes off, so it will be technically showing a $22,000
Yes.
loss.
Yes.
Okay, so technically, we're budgeting for a $26,000 loss, even
Yeah.
though we're bringing it down to be $11,000
Because
surplus.
the budget is on cash basis, we're determining how much cash we need
Yes.
with our fees to be able to run
Which
the
we actually have to
village.
raise, yeah.
Yeah.
But can we not? Do we not want to draw down that surplus a little bit?
It's gonna be drawn down if,
I don't know how we can really draw it down.
Well, by reducing fees.
I don't know, I just don't like the idea of reducing our reserves. Like sewer probably has the healthiest reserve, but.
I mean, what are we ever going to spend it on? If it's any capex, we're going to raise the fund. Well, I guess we can
Well,
use it for
potentially a
that.
sewer treatment plant if,
Yeah, but
you know, it's
yeah,
not a
that's not. We're not
guarantee
going to
that-
use our reserves for that. Those are really operating reserves. Well,
No.
they're not. I
No,
but
guess.
if
they're not.
I'm understanding it correctly, and should these year-to-date be real figures, which they obviously are gonna change, we are drawing it down $22,000 in the audit.
On an accrual financial statement basis, yeah, but in
On
terms
the-
of cash that we actually have to raise from our users,
But that 150 or whatever it is going down by, if these numbers were dead on correct, 22,000. So we are reducing that.
we are, it's, the amortization though, we have 3 components of our accumulated surplus. We have our tangible capital assets, and the amortization draws that down. So in terms of these reserves I've quoted you, amortization does not impact these. These are, I could probably, as an aside, show you the financial statements, and I have a spreadsheet on it. There's a note to the financial statements that we have our accumulated surplus, and it's made up of tangible capital assets, the contribution, that's where the
Yes.
amortization flows through.
Yes.
And then there's the unrestricted reserves, which is the 751 I've mentioned, 1,000 which I mentioned, and the restricted capital reserves, which is the 719,000. So
So
you
there's
are
750
correct
and
that-
719.
plus cash in the bank.
Well, that's
That's included.
separate, and hopefully your cash equals what your reserves are, so that
Oh, we're
it doesn't
in deep
always.
shit.
But
Okay,
so we can maybe
we
take
can
that
do-
off
yes,
the table. I know what
absolutely,
you're saying,
yes.
but it's kind of yes and no what you're saying. But in terms of, we do add back the amortization, so it's important to remember that we're not putting money aside for replacement of future assets or,
Cash money,
you
no.
know,
But
if
that's
something
what it
happens
costs to
the
run the
sewer.
operation. Yeah, we have to include, amortization is a cost of doing business.
So that's the sewer, and
Okay, so I'm
staff
just
are
going to
recommending a
get,
0% increase.
yeah, so no drawdown on reserves, just leave the reserves. Remind us of the number one more time.
187,000. And
That's
it'll
a lot of
probably
money
be-
that we don't know
it'll
what we're
actually
gonna spend it
probably down to
on.
about 170 after this year.
Just to give you an idea, one blockage, one actual pipe blockage with insurance claims, et cetera, could run you about 120,
Yeah.
140,000. So
Yeah, you're right. Well, more like a collapse than a blockage, but yeah. Can our TV camera actually go in there? Great. Save the best for last.
You
Best for
refer
last.
that to next year, though. You do the thing, you tax people a year after. So, I mean, that's
good.
wash in, wash out.
Unless we provide it as a
Oh, gratis? To
service.
the third of the village? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's only a third of the village paying for it.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
and there's an argument too that there's an argument for rate stabilization, that
Yeah.
in fact, a lot of municipalities, the money they put aside in the reserves is also for rate stabilization. So if you have a year where it looks like you may have to have a 10% increase, you draw from reserves to offset that.
I'd almost say that you come from West Van, which is where they
Really?
do that.
I'm from West Van, Mr. Jaffer.
No
Yeah.
comment.
Okay.
Okay, solid waste. Solid
Although
waste.
on that, just to interrupt, sorry, I want people to realize what it costs to run this place. And if they want the vanity of being a small municipality, people must pay.
Well, and I think we did a good job of talking about the water at the last public meeting about the
It
budget.
worked very
Is
well,
the message was finally getting through that I know the rate increases have been high, but this is what the water costs. Solid waste budget. It's a little bit different than the other utilities. We basically just want the fees to match what we pay to provide the solid waste. There's no need for reserves here. So the idea is to have a net zero budget each year. If there is a bit of a surplus or a deficit, the solid waste is actually part of the general fund, so it flows to the general fund. So we've entered into a new contract that starts April 1st. And so what I've done is I've taken the Smith-Wright contract, 3 months of that, 9 months of the new contract, and as expected, the fees have come down. We've added in the secondary sweep revenue. So as a result, overall, I can have a 6% decrease in user fees to have a balanced budget. We'll know more when we do the bylaw exactly how much each segment will go up and down, because we have single-family residential, we have the marina, we have the cafe. So overall, rates would go down 6%, but the actual amounts may change a bit from that. So it's a fairly straightforward budget.
Sure,
Now's
if
a good
you-
time- Now's a good
yeah.
time to go further to the meeting. There was a bit of, when Nye wasn't here to present his report about the proposal, there was some confusion about the glass and the recycling of the glass, so maybe Nye can speak to that now.
So Smith Wright does collect glass. Unfortunately, what they do, they don't have a separate bin in their trucks. So they will dump the glass in with the rest of their loads. If the
But
glass...
which load?
The recycling
Recycling.
The
load.
recycling load, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is, as you dump the glass in, it shatters, it breaks, it embeds in the plastic, it embeds in paper, it embeds in all the other recyclables. If the contamination level in those other materials reaches a certain threshold, the machines will kick it out and the whole load goes into the garbage. So they may be actually picking it up. They don't want to advertise it, they don't want to take a lot of glass, but there are consequences to the way they're doing it.
Probably means that all of our recycling loads have gone to the landfill.
I don't, it's not an optical sorting, so there is hand sorting. It's more, hand sorting is more detailed than optical sorting. It's more labor intensive, but it's more thorough. So I wouldn't say all of our loads. It depends on how much glass is going in and how much is breaking, and whether it's shattering into a multi-million.
And so the new one will be what?
The new trucks have a separate compartment for glass.
So you'll have to have you'll have to have a glass bin,
Yes,
a plastics
you will-
bin,
yeah.
a paper bin.
Glass bins are coming. The contractor has ordered them.
Oh, really? What do they look
Yeah.
like?
They're gray bins that you basically
Little
put
things
up.
like this that everybody
Yeah.
gets one of?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think
That's what
we
we
saw
have
the
in North
picture.
Vancouver. It's just
Yeah.
like your blue box, but it's
Yeah.
gray. Apparently gray is the standard color for glass. So you just
Mhm.
throw your glass in it, it goes into a separate compartment and it will be recycled.
And
Absolutely.
they are supplying the bins?
I believe so.
Well,
That was
correct
what
me
they
if I'm
talked
wrong,
about.
we've all supplied our own bins up to now, right?
Yeah, no, they've ordered the bins.
But what about the blue bins and the green bins? There's no expectation, I think, that
The
any
blue bins and the gray bins are owned by the residents. They will still be resident bins. That are
green
put up.
bins. The
Yeah.
grey bins will be owned by the contractor? The glass bins?
The glass bins, I believe, will be owned by the contractor. I'm not 100% sure.
The reason I'm sort of belaboring the point is that there'll be a PR piece around that if they don't
Absolutely.
supply it,
Yeah.
people will need, by the 1st of April, they'll need to have an extra bin.
Yeah, no, the bins are being supplied.
Okay, that's
I'm
fine.
100% sure of that.
But I think it's important that when we're telling people about this, we should also state that our glass was not necessarily
It's a good
being
news piece, yeah.
recycled.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll need quite a big grey bin, please. No reason, just,
What type of glass?
well, bottles.
So, yeah, that was really all I had to say about the solid waste budget.
Okay, that's good. Well, that's a good
It's-
story
it
all
will be good
around.
news, yes.
We've improved our footprint on the earth. It goes down 6%. It's great. Well done.
Yeah.
That's
Up 6 and going more next year. Good
That's
for
a great
you guys.
story.
That is a good story.
why do you say more next year?
Because
Well,
we
it's
still
only
have
9 months.
3 months of the higher cost.
Yeah, well done.
So, that was water, sewer, solid waste. So the difference between those budgets and why I did those first, as I said, is they're more detailed because we have a tighter timeline. So now we have to look at the next budget with slightly different eyes. It's,
Yeah,
okay,
we'll
go
just-
ahead.
I thought of a question, and it's probably a silly question. I can't offhand think of any reason why we would need it, but is there a potential reason why we would want to have a reserve for solid waste budget?
No, for 2 reasons. First of all, it's part of the general fund, but because it's a completely contracted out service and we have no capital or no assets, we don't need a reserve for that. But
What
so it's a
about
utility, but
any
it's-
cleanup, remaining remediation on our ex-garbage dump up at the pit? Would that be a separate issue? That wouldn't be a garbage fee.
A separate issue. Yeah, it'd probably be a contract service in any event.
Yeah,
But
and
I
then
wouldn't see that as a solid waste expense.
Yeah.
And solid waste is funny, it's a utility, but historically that's always shown as part of the general fund, mainly because it is a self-funding fund and because you don't need reserves for it. Unless, I guess, you do the service yourself and have your own dump trucks, and then you would
Trucks,
have
yeah.
capital. But
Yeah.
the main reason is there's no solid waste capital.
That's the way we like it. Let's keep it that way. Okay?
So, sorry, that's my order here. So, for the next budget, this is the general fund. So the process for this will be, we've scheduled 3 to 4 CSC meetings. This is your initial look. My hope is we'll look at this. The main purpose was to look at it, get a sense of what, how much extra money we would have before capital and supplementals and before transfers to reserves, hopefully 2 reserves. We would see how much we have for those other items, and then at the next meeting, staff and council would bring forward the items they'd like to see in the budget or they feel we need. And then we would, staff would get costs on that. And then I've sort of scheduled that through February, I think about 4 CSCs, to fine tune that number to come to the final budget. So that being said, it's a high level, but what is very accurate in this budget is the labor model. Again, we've done the labor model, that's the biggest operating cost. I'm very comfortable with that number. So that's a solid number. We have gone through line by line and I pulled out any supplementals from 2016, I pulled them out. So that, so you may see in some cases a decrease in the budget in 2017 because it was a one-time item in 2016. Things that I knew we had under budget last year, I just tweaked a bit, but it's still a fairly high-level budget. And again, because we don't have the actual 2016 numbers, I'm sensing we are going to be a little favorable, have a bit of a surplus from last year, but again, I would like that surplus to go straight to reserves, so I haven't included it in the number that we said was available. So this is a process that we did last year, and I found it worked fairly well. So if you look at the summary page, I've put in, for no particular reason, but I put in a 5% tax increase. I thought that was and then, as you know, a 1% tax increase is 11,800. So it's really just to show you, we have a surplus of about, it's not really a surplus, we have available cash for transfers to reserves, for all expenditures on capital, and any operating supplementals of $334,000, which is a little bit lower than last year based on a 5% tax increase. And then the next time you see this budget, the 2016 numbers will be finer tuned. We'll have gone through it line by line and we'll have fine-tuned the numbers. So this number is just an estimate. I don't see it changing dramatically, but it will be go up and down as we go line by line and tweak the budget. And then in terms of the supplementals, there will be. Sorry?
3%.
It's 5%. I've increased.
Utilities are fine.
No, it's a separate line. I've done a separate line of a 5% increase for the general property tax. So you're right, it's being fed by the others, but this is the property tax. It's increased 5, with the utility increases that we've just talked about, or lack of
But
increases.
the taxation is only property tax, mill rate property tax. Oh no, there are some parcel
No,
taxes
sorry,
still.
I was asked a separate question, and
Mhm.
I was just clarifying a point. Yeah, so the 334, I'd say was accurate within about 10% up or down, because for the next meeting, we will have the equivalent of what the water is now, water and sewer for the general fund. We'll have gone through line by line and identified things.
What will be the net change, or maybe it's in the next page, in 2016 budget for stuff that doesn't just get passed on to 2017? In other words, what did we save off the budget for 2016? Do you have a sense of that yet?
No, that's what I'll have when I
Do you want to
fine tune
make
the
an educated guess?
2016. I feel we'll have a slight surplus.
Yeah, I think we spent
even
less
with
than
the
we-
rebudgets.
Yeah. Excluding the rebudgets.
Yeah, because we had the obvious savings from the IMP, but then we had the election, we had other expenses, so there were a lot of puts and takes, so to speak.
Good
So
math.
I'm not anticipating a huge surplus, and then there'll be the rebudgets.
Surplus to agreed budget.
Yeah, and like I say, even if there was a surplus, I don't really want to add it to this 334. I'd like it to flow to reserves, and
Yeah,
then,
absolutely.
and like I say, this number isn't just all to spend. It's for 3 things: transfers to reserves, capital, and operating expenditures. Supplemental operating expenditures. So that could be my ask, and you could email staff, before the next meeting. But the next CSC, we discuss the things we'd like to see that aren't in this base budget, and then again, staff will take that away and come back with a number for you in terms of what it will cost.
Yeah, in terms of revenue, I'm hoping that we will get some at least positive feedback from the ministry on our requests to include us in the rural dividend fund, even though we happen to be an urban municipality, to allow us to not contribute our share of the gas tax to TransLink, but in fact to keep it like the rest of communities do, other than Capital Regional District and GVRD, because we don't get the benefit. And just so that you know, at the moment, this $56,000 gas tax represents 5% of our allocation. Other communities, other than Capital Regional District, that's Victoria, and us, get 75% of their allocation, and the rest goes to regional things like airports. The indication is that we may actually be successful in that, in which case the formula is too complicated to work out, but the gas tax may
Would
be
increase,
significantly
yeah.
more.
Right.
I think if that does happen, we put it straight to reserves.
Right.
So we don't need to budget for it,
Right.
but it may happen that way.
But on that note, actually, going back to the summary page, thank you for reminding me. When I go through the 2017 budget, you'll show that I do have one rebudget here of the Build Canada, but that's because I've included the revenue up above, so if I didn't include that, I'd distort the amount of the surplus. And that's what you reminded me, the gas tax funding. We are required to put that into a reserve until we spend it. It's very wide parameters on what we can spend it on. But I wanted to show that coming out of the surplus, because that is going to flow in. That's not to say that in 2017 we can choose a capital project that we want to use the gas tax money from, and I can show it flowing back in with the offsetting expense. But that's why that's shown as a reduction. And then plus the water and sewer surplus, I would like them to flow into the water and sewer fund, so that's why I'm showing them coming off as well. But just to let you know, an update on the gas tax funding, we have 109,000 at the end of 2015. 55,000 will go in that for 2016. And then in 2017, we'll receive another 56. So by the end of next year, we will have $200,000 in that reserve, and it can be used for a project. The more typical projects it's used for are road capital projects.
And
So
we
it's
just
something
happen
to
to
keep
have
in
one of
mind
those
with
coming up.
Bayview. Yeah. I mean, the hope is we can apply for a grant for that,
Yeah.
but we do have that
But so
money
just
for
tell us
roads.
about that road. This is the project now, just to remind council, between Mountain and Stewart on Bayview. If the fund application
Clean Water Wastewater Fund,
would be the next round, which is
Phase 2.
who knows when. The funding will be late in 2017, or the award would. So we wouldn't get to that until. I think this council would like to see some tangible results of all this stuff. road fixing is a very obvious benefit.
Yeah, we need to sit down and go through our capital, or our capital plan for roads. Until we're 100% sure we're not gonna dig up the road in 5 years to put in a water main, I'm loath to pick a road and repave it,
Absolutely.
right? So I think, and I haven't been here long enough to have that planned out, but that is somewhere we wanna go. We don't wanna be doing that.
Well, that was the overall intention on the master part of the infrastructure master
Mhm.
plan. Yeah, okay, fine. So I'm hearing you say we're not going to spend that gas tax money. Not this
right
year.
away,
Yeah,
no.
not this year.
No, we could, ideally, the Bayview Road replacement would be the clean water wastewater phase 2 intake.
When is that now? April.
Well, we're hoping it'll be this summer, this fall, I don't know.
Fall, I would think.
The application
I think,
intake.
I think originally, when Ron and I went to that meeting, I think they mentioned
Mhm.
fall, September, or something like that of 2017, so
Yeah.
was their hope, but, you know.
Oh, that's a long way from now. Yeah, anything can
Yeah,
happen.
so if that culvert, that we did the temporary repair on does fail again,
Yeah.
we will need to go ahead and do that.
Might change the equation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just remind us that we have 2 years left. What can we actually point to in terms of tangible investment in Lions Bay? I started making a list the other day, and it's
Pretty small.
doesn't have much on it. We've got lots of plans. We've got the infrastructure master plan. We've got, hardened infrastructure. We haven't had a boil water advisory for over 2 years. These are all great things, but it's not.
There'll be a lot of stuff after the next election, there'll be a lot of stuff,
But that's too late for us
I know.
in terms of
But all this,
looking good.
that's the problem with what we inherited when we came in here, we knew what we had to do.
Yeah.
And we're doing it, but it may not, the benefits will not significantly show up until another, 6 years, 5 years after we start.
It's all hidden.
Yeah, I would just remind council that we have applied for 2 phase 1 intakes for 2 grants, and we've also applied for the railway crossing.
I hate to
grants as
tell you
well.
this, but railway crossings ain't sexy.
But the
No.
water is, and
A video of our sewer pipeline, that is sexy.
You got it, your worship.
Okay, back to the budget.
okay, so that's the overview of the general fund, what you're seeing this week versus what you'll see next week. I've broken it down into the departments as well as pulling out the revenue. So any questions? Anything you'd like me to look at further for the next meeting?
Why don't you
or-
just flag the things that are significant changes from prior year? And I think you can do that on the consolidated probably, rather than the detailed lines.
Yeah, because it's still just a base budget, there aren't really significant changes. Probably one of the biggest one in terms of revenue is the building permits, because of the amount we increased them. There's 2 reasons that went up. The fees did go up per the fees bylaw. How I predicted that number, I just looked at the average of the last 2 years and I applied what we would have got with the new fees. So I've got a fairly accurate number, but then I have sort of a one-time exceptional item. We do have a house in Lions Bay that will be built next year, or that we will get a building permit for, and it's a $2 million house. And that I calculated a separate building permit for and add it to the revenue. So that's the increase. It was the
Okay.
fee increase plus what I would call a one-time item.
Well, if everything goes well, according to the changing the suite of development bylaws, we may see several new houses built in Lions Bay in 2017. So that's good. The thing that struck my mind was the Parks and Rec number. That went up pretty significantly.
That was mainly because of the allocation of the salaries. Parks has historically been under budgeted on wages, so it got a bigger slice of the pie, as we like to talk
Okay,
about with
fine.
property taxes, of the wages.
Okay, that's all. Okay.
The parking pass is annual, why was that $17,000 in 2015? I know I'm going backwards here.
No, that's okay. The parking, fines. Yeah, that was kind of a one-time exception year. There was a real blitz on parking that year.
Okay.
I can't, so I'm looking to my expert.
seemed
I
abnormally
can give
high.
you more details on that. I had done some stats on that a year ago, and
We had a fairly
it was
draconian bylaw officer, is what
it
Pam's trying
was-
not to say.
Actually, no, that was it. You were right. We did issue a lot of tickets that year, and
Okay.
then we felt that
There was
last year was a
a
better
fallout in other
balance.
regards, but
Yes.
we got a lot of
Yes.
money for it.
Okay,
But actually, on that note, the offset, of course, is the expense. So
yes.
I felt the bylaw officers last year worked really well. We had 2, So it enabled us to do an 8-hour shift on a Friday, a 12-hour shift on Saturday, a 12-hour shift on Sunday, and a 12-hour on stats. So I budgeted for that same complement.
Okay.
Because so it did increase the costs a little bit, but I felt that that was a good balance.
Have you given any consideration to what may be happening in the parking plan in what we see here?
There's nothing in for signage. That's what we would discuss as part of the supplemental capital.
It would all
is
supplemental
that,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. Okay. So it's on my list that is almost a given. We have to have that in our capital budget to increase signage.
Something that went lower was the hall rental. Is that because of in-kind, or no? It
Yes, the
would still show.
in-kind entry isn't in here. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Last year, we started, when people put in a municipal grant, they have the cash they get, but then they also have the in-kind, and we've
Yes.
never booked that. And we started booking it, net zero impact on taxation, but we basically credit the revenue, and then we debit the expense of usually the public works, and also the cost of the hall. So I haven't
Absolutely,
budgeted
it's what
that
it costs to
yet.
run the place.
That's sort of a fine tuning I'll add to the
Okay.
budget. So it looks like it's gone down, but it hasn't actually.
Okay.
And actually, on that note, with municipal grants, council had, I think at the last meeting, said they would like the presentations from the people requesting municipal grants. And I was thinking February 7th, CSC would be the best time for that. I'd like to give everyone enough notice. I think to do it January 24th doesn't give them enough notice. So if council's okay with that, I'll send out the invitations. And once again, I'll just ask people to present who are receiving a grant greater than $1,000. We have the small ones, but I don't think it's beneficial to have anyone come in to do a presentation. So it would probably be 4 or 5 presentations. The big ones are the events committee, seniors, and the Arts Council. So is February 7th okay?
To the extent that, do people mind having to take the afternoon off to come in and present, or?
No, they didn't last year, and I gave them, when I send the email out, I give everyone a heads up that council will like to have just, 5-10 minute presentation. I think a lot of them actually welcome the opportunity to tell council exactly what they do with the money and.
Yep. Okay. You have not yet budgeted any staffing changes, obviously, in the planning
No,
department
that would
or
be
anything.
purely
That would
be
be
a supplemental,
supplemental. Okay. Okay, so what do we think? Colleagues?
Are we just going through all of them, or we're just?
Yeah, shoot.
Yep, we can go through. And then also, as you look at it, please email me with any questions, because then I can provide answers at the January 24th meeting if you see something after.
What's happening on the 24th meeting?
Again, it will be another chance to look at the water sewer. We'll have fine-tuned the 2016 numbers. That will probably be very quick. And we will take a more detailed look at, the big thing will be supplementals. I'll have a revised sort of surplus number for you, and then we'll spend the time talking about what our supplementals and capital requests will be.
So can you send us out a note what you expect in terms of deadlines for supplemental requests, CapEx requests? Just give us a heads up now. What are we talking about? You need those numbers by when?
Well, that's what I'd like the January 24th for the January 24th meeting. So just come,
Okay,
we'll have it'll be a CSC, so we can just talk about it.
Are we just going to
and
throw it
we'll-
all on the table
I think
at that
so,
meeting?
and talk, because I think what I'd like to do is, like last year, we had this huge list from emails, and we seem to have 3 meetings just chipping away at it. I'd rather kind of go from bottom up now, say this is how much money we have, discuss them, and maybe some won't even make the list. And then when we have them on the list, staff will go away, and maybe we can do a good job of fine-tuning what the true expense will be.
Would you be able to provide a spreadsheet on a screen so that we could actually see the impact as people shout them out?
We could keep a running tally, and then
Yeah,
after
just a
that
running
meeting,
tally.
for the first meeting, I think we're just gonna figure out what's on the list, and then I can definitely do a running tally. And we
Squeeze
can-
it and see.
And then send it out to council.
Okay, this is sort of a small.
Sure, I'm sorry, which,
I'm on council.
um,
I think
That's
you
never
said you
enough.
budget for elections every year, and then just.
so I'm going backwards. I know what you said. Yes, what we do, the reason it looks a little funny with the actual, ignoring the by-election, if there weren't any by-election, we estimate a cost of an election is about $16,000, so I budget $4,000 a year. It goes into a reserve. I'm continuing to budget the $4,000, but the actual was higher because that was the cost of the election. And I haven't actually, now that you say that, I haven't actually put the $4,000 in there for the accrual.
And the the communications seems really high this year. I mean, you're not
Yes.
budgeting for it, it
But
just.
no, that was the one-time item for the referendum. And we had a communication
Oh,
plan.
right, okay, yes, that's right,
what
yes,
that was,
yes, well spent. And are there no, what was the other, professional services for next year? I'm not sure what they
No,
were this year.
again, that 5,000 was we hired a consultant to do the strategic plan.
Okay.
So that was a really good example of a one-time item that was in the 2016 budget that I just removed for the 2017. So like I said, I've gone through and I've pulled all that type of stuff out, but that's all.
EOC, the
Yes.
maintenance, what, is that maintenance of the Clap building? I didn't know what it was.
It'd be an
Yes.
allocation, I imagine.
Maintenance, yes,
Is
thank
it
you,
just-
Haley. Yes, it's the maintenance of the Platt building.
Is that a fair allocation? Seems quite high, but it doesn't matter. It's all going to come out somewhere.
Now, with the fire department, I'm actually meeting with the fire chief on
Okay.
Monday to go over his budget. I've gone through and sort of done my best estimate of the budget. I've kept it pretty close to the 2016 budget. But that will be more fine-tuned after I've met with the,
Okay, because-
and we're gonna discuss his rebudgets as well, because there was a fair portion of his capital that wasn't spent. So we have to determine what needs to be rebudgeted, as well as any supplementals he might have.
Okay, no, the two I questioned were the material services and the training. They seem to be going, compared to actuals, not budgets. They
Yes.
seem to have, well, one's going quite a bit lower, and the other one's going quite a bit higher
In fire?
in fire. The maintenance was, the material was 40, 39, down to 34.
Yeah.
And then the training's gone from like 30 to 40. Which, I mean,
In terms
I'm
of
not
the-
saying they're wrong, I'm
No, no,
just.
yeah, and I haven't gone over it, but I can talk about the training. I know we have spent less than is shown, but the plan this year is we're going to come with a list of all the firefighters and the training they're required to have and the cost to completely substantiate that number, and that number may actually go up.
Okay,
So, but there will be a lot more detail provided
The
for that number.
2016 actual number will go up, or the 17 budget.
The 17 budget will go up.
Well, that's as a result of the playbook and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I want it to actually be, and Peter will be meeting with the trainer and with Andrew to go over the plan, is to actually plan out what everyone's taking for the year, put a cost to it, so it'll be a highly accurate number.
okay. And the Parks and Rec, the salaries have gone
Yes, that was.
down, which is a reallocation, is it?
The parks?
Well, from 2015.
Should have gone up. We asked about that already.
Sorry. Yeah, for Parks and Recreation, I've actually increased the budget because
Yes.
the actual, it's always been over budget. And that was when I talked about the allocation. We lowered sewer, we lowered water a little bit, and we put it into parks, and just to reflect what the actual expenditures were.
Okay.
Where does snow removal budget come in? It doesn't really matter. Do you have a sense of how much extra we will have now paid this year over plan for snow removal?
We will have it for the next meeting, but we were tracking, we hadn't spent a lot on overtime, so we had a lot left in overtime by the end of the year, so although we may be over budget, it won't be substantial, but we can, like, Haley's sense is, like, we've been tracking it, that we're actually. we're
You
using
budget
up-
overtime.
Yes, we budget 25,000 of overtime, and we hadn't used much of it by the time the snow hit, so the snow actually probably will not cause us to go over budget, or if it does, just marginally, and that's the payroll. The most of that is just payroll cost.
Well, where I'm actually going is ultimately I'm going to want a number to tell the village
What snow removal cost.
what snow removal cost is.
Yep. We can pull that, yeah, it's fairly
Including
easy to
the
do
salt
from-
and, you know.
because it gets recorded separately on the timesheet.
does,
So we
eh?
can pull in, it's
That's right.
mostly a labor cost. Obviously, there's the salt, but the bulk of it is pure labor.
Seems like snow always falls at 2 in the morning. Do we actually pay-
And on weekends and holidays.
Yeah, exactly. Do we pay overtime and double overtime for shift change, or is it only ever just time and a half?
Depends when they're called out.
Do we have a double
And
overtime
Yes.
concept?
Yeah,
We do,
we do.
okay.
Yes, anything over 10 hours in a day is automatically double time.
Double time,
Yeah.
not just
And if you
overtime.
work on the 7th day, so if you work 6 days in a row, then the 7th day, that's automatically double time. as
And
well.
overtime is everything over 6.5?
8 hours,
Over 8.
yeah.
Okay.
And any call out is automatically overtime.
Overtime or double time?
Overtime for the first 2, and then
Okay, that all sounds about right. Okay, what else you got there, Eileen?
The only other thing was Public Works. The contract services seem to have gone down and the salaries have gone up. I assume we've
Yeah.
hired a contract person.
Well, the salaries was just the allocation, like basically
Okay.
I took, the overall labor just went up, but we're estimating the contract to go up, but how I allocate it changed, so it's kind of thrown off the comparability in all the
Okay.
public works area. And the contract services, yes, that was an account we really took a close look at, just looking at historically what we'd spent, and, with the best, we budgeted with the best intentions, but historically we weren't spending all that, so that's why we, oh, and the IMP is removed as well. That was a big part of the 2016 budget, so now we brought it down more to. It's a
looks
tough
like-
one to budget, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, sorry.
I didn't say, it can be a tough one to budget because you're kind of budgeting for the unexpected, like if things come up and you have to have a contract. And in the past, although it looks like we've over budgeted, it wasn't done purposely to pad the budget. There were genuine intentions to do these studies, but it just seems we didn't have enough time. So we wanted to really look at it in a more ruthless
No,
manner
it's-
this year and say, you know what, we're not gonna have time to do that, so we're not gonna budget.
I see that you've deliberately you've reallocated $12,000 of the $30,000 for the planning consultant into 2017.
Yeah, that's,
I think council would tell you right now, keep budgeting for a planning consultant.
that'll be a supplemental. So that's purely just a rebudget. We budgeted 30,000 for a planner. We knew it was gonna straddle the year.
Yeah.
There's 12,000 left on its contract, so to
But there's
me-
still 6 in there, extra.
Yeah, there's always a base amount of 6,
Okay.
just to,
Okay, fine.
we've always budgeted in case we need we had a one-off planner that we used, so that's a base amount, but the extra 30 supplemental, I've rebudgeted, but you're correct, we may come back with an additional 27 supplemental for more planning time.
Okay, fine.
How did insurance, it's lower than it has some of the actuals.
For which category?
Sorry, Public Works.
We're just assuming more risk ourselves. Self-insured. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I basically just, yeah, I did, okay, that might be a mistake. I usually just put a small inflationary increase in, so I can take a closer look at that. Like I say, we'll go line by line before the
Yeah.
next meeting.
Okay.
And say, if you look at this and you think of any questions, please email me, and it's things I can look into before the next meeting, the January 24th meeting, but the next meeting is gonna be, the focus is on how we spend, basically the surplus from this budget. Plus, we'll have fine-tuned these numbers. We'll have gone through and it will be more like the water budget where we've looked at every line. And any major changes I make to this budget, I will track for you, so.
Okay, good.
I won't do a track changes, because some we may only tweak by $50 or $100, but if I make any major changes to any of these lines, I will flag them for
Just flag them
council.
for us, yeah. The $18,000 telecommunications plan, not communication study. but,
SCADA, yeah. Yeah,
We need
that-
to come up with the terms so we know what we're talking about. Where does that sit in here?
That is the one thing we've identified in water that we will be rebudgeting.
And it is $18,000, and is it in here?
It is, it's on the summary page, it's in the water.
Oh, it's in the water section?
Page where I
Page
showed
what?
it as a rebudget. Page, 9. You can see where I've rebudgeted the 18.5. So the SCADA is a good example. We've rebudgeted the 18.5 because we've taxed for it. But when we re-examine that project as part of the 2017 budget process, if we feel that we need a little bit more money, that becomes a separate budget ask. Like, I only rebudget what's already been taxed for. That's not to say, like the planner's a good example. I've rebudgeted the part we already taxed for. That's not to say that we can't ask for additional planning time in the 2017 budget, but that would be a supplemental request. That-
Sorry, I'm not seeing the rebudget. Am I looking at the wrong page?
Yeah, if you look, you see the
Page what?
page 9,
9,
and you
yeah.
see the transfer 12,404. If you just go up 4 lines, it says the other capital rebudget's the 18.5, right there. So that's where we rebudgeted.
Oh, there, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I just called it other capital,
Yeah,
so you would
okay.
have no idea what that was, sorry.
Let's come up with a sexy name, an acronym. Okay, folks, what's your pleasure? Ron?
Just a couple of notes for Pam. I'm looking at page 8 and page 9. If for the next meeting, and this is to do with the water budget, if we're going to be talking about the 5% versus another number, for your footnote number 7 and your footnote number 9, if you can continue your footnotes here and itemize what the content of the 92,000 and the proposed 45,000 are, then it would make the decision whether it's 5, 7, or 3 a lot easier.
Yeah, very good point. Those are big numbers.
Sorry, the 92, what was the other?
Number
47
and 45.
45 on each.
Right, well, the 45, like I say, is just a placeholder, as we talked about. I just felt that it was, because we have really no capital in here other than SCADA, and it's also the possibility of having to pay for the plan if we are successful with the grant, but the 92.
Put something down for me.
Yeah. We can do
Because, I mean, this is the taxing for an eventuality that's,
that.
shouldn't be there, it should just be up the top.
I agree. Yeah.
And the next one, which was only the administration, which was page 17, professional fees, contract services.
One second.
If you could,
Just 1 second.
Yep.
Sorry, I'll find it.
which is your footnote number 2,
Yes,
if you could also break down the footnote.
okay,
So what's legal, what's,
sure,
What?
absolutely.
Good idea.
thank you.
Yeah, I don't really know the extent to which the taxpayers expect us to, resell this to them. I think, it's our job to watch out for their interests. I mean, compared to how this was, it's pretty understandable and pretty obvious. It's really now up to us to decide how much more we want to spend and potentially have to tax for it or not. I get the sense this is going to be a bit of a sort of a holding pattern year. The 17% for the grant funds, you've shown the grant revenue, so the 17, our contribution's in there, obviously. Yeah.
It's in as a loan, because we're going
Yeah,
to
it's in as a
for the
loan. Yeah, we're going to loan
17%.
that 17%, borrow that 17%. So, I don't know. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but my 17%, my supplementals are very onesie twosie. AV suites, maps. Nothing big. Well, that's not strictly true, but
Okay.
in fact, the only one I'll just give you a heads up is whether we want to contribute hard cash to the UBC MOU study. We are going to be contributing in kind, valuing our labor, including the IC's contribution hours, valuing labor at, say, fully allocated $100 an hour.
And we had talked about a portion of that for the capital, for the 45 that was in there.
How much of that?
It was gonna be up for discussion.
The reason why is that a lot of these funding sources like to see contribution from the municipality, from a municipality, rather than an academic institution. And the numbers are big. 300,000 is the grant that we're talking about today. And I think they would like to see some sort of contribution, whether in kind or in cash, from the affected municipality on the order of $10,000. So if we value our services at $100 an hour, we're not talking about a lot of cash. And to catch a $300,000 grant to do the stuff that we're talking about, which, maybe we want to do it. It's a very academic, esoteric, long-term commitment. So we've got better things to spend $5,000 on, I know. But so we'll have to think about that.
And this
We-
go ahead.
No, go on.
I apologize. That was my plan for the next meeting, having this exact type of discussion and kind of editing things before they even make the list, so we don't spend as much time cutting it back, but having that type of discussion and whether or not we want it on the list and we value it, and then we
I'm going to
get a
bring my
total
poster
list.
printer back.
Okay,
Just
on
kidding.
On the proviso, you have somewhere to put it.
Just kidding. Okay, is that it?
Very good.
You happy, Eileen?
Yeah.
At this stage of the game? Ron?
Yep.
Fred? Jim? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
You
Okay.
need a motion to receive?
Yeah, okay, so we've actually received 2 reports. Let's do a motion to receive both of them. Can I have a motion? I'll take that a general flick of the wrist as a motion.
Yes, that's what it is.
And a second? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. New business? None? Public questions and comments? This is your chance.
Nothing?
Okay, motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor, opposed, carried, meeting adjourned.